Welcome to Emissions Inventory Fundamentals Online. The fundamental rule of this entire course, there's no such thing as a dumb question. The only dumb question is that question you did not ask. This is the introduction to the course module. I'm going to talk about how much time writing an emissions inventory takes. That's kind of the bad news. Talking about installing TICE and emailing a screen capture to us, which is your homework for this first module. The way this workshop works is that this is not an informational course where we're going to talk about emissions inventories and different kinds of emissions inventories, and you'll learn all about that and then go back to your office and say, okay, what do I do? How do I start? We're going to actually work. So the intent is that by the end of the 6 webinars, you will have completed a really good draft, close to final, of a level 4 emissions inventory. We'll meet today and talk about that, and you guys will have homework, which is basically every homework isn't going to be some sort of thing to make you memorize anything. It's going to be working on various sections of your emissions inventory report. Next, we're going to talk about the different types of sources: point sources, non-point sources, road sources, non-road sources, how those work, how those fit together, and we will go over sections of your emissions inventory report that you can write as homework. We will be introducing TICE. We'll demonstrate TICE to you. The homework for Module 3 will be using TICE to map your tribal lands and the area that you want to inventory. Module 4 will be importing data into TICE. We will have already, thanks to your amazing instructor Angelique that I have the honor of working with, she has already looked at all of the participants' tribal locations and downloaded relevant data around those reservations for you. And so she's formatting the data so that it can be imported into TICE. The next module, 5, presenting results, we'll get into all the maps and tables and charts that are in TICE and how to take those out of TICE and put them in a Word document, which serves as your emissions inventory report. Then Module 6, GIS, we're going to talk more about maps. You want to make sure the maps that you have tell a story. Basically, this whole project of an emissions inventory is to tell the story of the air pollution on your land and where it came from. What kinds of air pollution there is, whether it came from tribal sources, off-reservation sources, and maps are their own language, and they tell a story, and you can modify the way the maps look in TICE to help you tell that story. So how does this webinar series, Emissions Inventory Fundamentals, fit in with our emissions inventory curriculum? Well, this is our first course, Fundamentals, and then for those who want to continue to the next workshop, Emissions Inventory Advanced, we have another webinar series which is more extensive. And we'll talk about the different levels of an emissions inventory, but basically when you have to go to sources, for example, gas stations, and ask them how many cars and trucks do they fill up to get an idea of the amount of gas that is processed there, which of course then is used in a TICE calculator to calculate the emissions from those gas stations. Or you have a lot of unpaved roads and you want to calculate the particulate matter emitted when people drive on those roads, you need to get an idea of the number of miles, the lengths of those roads. You may have to go out and count cars. Renee Curo from Viejas in California wrote a level 3 emissions inventory in which she gathered source data. I think she gathered information from a community center in terms of their heating, so the number of gallons of propane that they purchased and used in a year. And she also went out to the expressway that runs from Phoenix to San Diego and bisects her reservation and counted cars. A lot of times vehicle use information is available on the internet, sometimes it's not. So for those people who are going to gather source data for their emissions inventory, they will continue on to the second workshop, which we will have immediately after this one finishes. In order to come to Workshop 2, you have to have completed Workshop 1. Okay, following along in our document called Readme First, I want to let you know that we have videos for every single one of the PowerPoint presentations and every single one of the demonstrations, often broken up into discrete parts. Say if you want to learn just about importing point data, we have a video for that. All our videos are linked from the documents that you will download from our website. Continuing on, I want to show you the mock EI, which is in the Module 1 folder, and I want to just review it with you. So these are the documents in that folder. So let's double click on this. It has a fairly extensive table of contents. It is only 25 pages long, so it's not a huge document. It has the table of contents, point sources, and then the emissions from the point sources, non-point sources, and then the emissions from the non-point sources. Non-road mobile, so things that move around not on roads, and things that move around on roads. It has an executive summary with a table, introduction talking about what pollutants are included in the inventory. It has a very nice map showing the location. So this is a pretend reservation that Angelique has made just as a rectangle, and then she's created a buffer zone to look at sources that could potentially impact the air quality on the reservation. And she's got examples of tables that she pulls the numbers from TICE and puts into. She's got examples of tables like this one that come directly from TICE. She's got charts that can come directly from TICE. This is an example for you if you want to just cut and paste into this. That's what the intent of this is. Lots of tables, discussion for a rectangle of an example reservation in Arizona. So now we're going to talk about the levels of emissions inventories. When we say a level 4 emissions inventory, what do we mean by that, and how does that differ from a level 3, 2, or 1 emissions inventory? In your folder that you downloaded from the website is a document called QA/QC Levels Table. And the reason it's called QA/QC Levels Table is because the QA/QC that you need to do is different depending upon what level of an EI you have. To open that, I double click it, and we can see that there are 4 rows here. The highlighted row is an emissions inventory level 4 description. And that's what we are going to be completing in this first webinar series. And everybody has to start with a level 4 anyway. So whether you're going to go on to a level 2 or 3 in the next course, you're in the right place. So a level 4 emissions inventory is to use data that is already in the EPA's national database. This is an important first step because you need to know what information there already is about sources in your area. Every reservation has off-reservation sources that impact the air quality over their land. So the first step is to really think about the sources that you know about that could affect the air quality on your land. What is so fantastic is Angelique has already downloaded the data and is formatting it so that when you get it, you can import it into TICE and look at what already exists. States and counties load data into the National Emissions Inventory database, and there are many sources that are near your land. For example, you could have Title V sources. Everybody's got roads. So the first step is to import this data into TICE and see what it is. And this is what EPA calls a level 4 emissions inventory. And the purposes are perhaps to look at the feasibility of gathering data. You find out what information is already in the database to inform you as you look at changing air quality on your land, to inform you about possibly what sort of monitoring you might want to do. So this is where we're starting and where everybody starts. A level 3 is usually where most people continue on and probably stop. So this may or may not include direct measurements of sources. It's usually gathering data site-specific data, which could be interviews of the people who operate those sources. It could be you going out there and counting cars, you going out there and measuring the distances of roads. And this is useful in terms of setting bench line levels of emissions, and you know what sources there are on your land and what they're estimated to be emitting. Level 2 is one step up from that. Level 2 would be for a tribal implementation plan. Your strategy for that would be definitely to complete a level 2 emissions inventory. So where these tables say things like performance audits of equipment, what they mean is that then you would go to that source and say, I want to do an audit of your equipment where you make measurements of whatever's coming out of your stacks. So that's probably not going to be done, although it would be very interesting, and we would support you in looking into the feasibility of that. So a level 1 requires the highest degree of defensibility and generally involves going to the facility and saying, I want to make my own measurements of what's coming out of your facility. And the use would be monitoring for compliance. Are they really reporting correctly what their emissions are? So again, most people stop with a level 3 or at most a level 2. But we're going to be starting with a level 4 and looking at what data already exists for your area.